This week we're going to be talking about what makes up a sentence. Okay, so in the past few weeks we've been actually looking at what makes a complete sentence and other sentence errors that are created. And now we're going to jump into some more of the advanced grammar concepts by actually looking at what our sentences are made up of. This will hopefully help us with our sentence fluency, right, that we've been trying to work on. Good fluency, good word choice. This will help the flow of our paragraphs. Every sentence is like a math equation. Notice, we already know that every sentence has a subject, every sentence has a verb, but now we have one more component we're going to talk about. So when we talked about fragments, we said it has to have that complete thought. Okay, well, that's what we call a complement. So you probably have a new vocab word there. What is a complement? A complement is any word or phrase that completes the thought of the verb meaning. John, we know, is the subject because John is who the sentence is about. John is doing the action. Gave, we know, is a verb. It is the action. So John gave Molly a ring. Okay, Molly a ring would be the complement. It is what finishes the thought. It tells us what John gave. Okay. From this point on, all of our complements then will be in that sort of purple color. Okay, just to get a clear visual. So the first complement we're going to talk about, we actually have 4. We're going to focus on 2 today, and then we'll do the next 2 next week. But the first complement that we're talking about is the predicate adjectives. To really narrow it down, predicate is just a big word for the verb. We just haven't been calling it the predicate, we've only been calling it the verb. And just as a simple review, for adjective, right, any word that describes a noun. That being said, we can see that the predicate adjective actually describes the subject. Right? Look at my sentence. Felix is nice. Nice is an adjective. It describes Felix. So an adjective describing Felix goes back to the subject. So therefore I know it's a predicate adjective. But notice the placement. Is after the verb. So I have my verb here, but then I have my adjective, but instead of putting it before my subject, like I usually do, right, I'm not going to say nice Felix. If I want to describe him, I just say Felix is nice. So this becomes a predicate adjective. The other one we want to look at is the predicate nominative. And you notice here in the side margin, or in these parentheses here, nominative is just a fancy word for noun. So we can actually call this a predicate noun and be fine. And this is any noun after a verb describing the subject. Okay, just like the adjective, the predicate adjective was any adjective that after a verb describes the subject, this would be any noun after the verb describing the subject. Right, so Mr. Jenkins is a teacher. Okay. Teacher we know is a noun. It's a person. Right. It is describing who Mr. Jenkins is or what he does for a living. So it is the noun describing the subject. Therefore, it is a predicate nominative. Okay. Here's a little hint for you. How do you know when something is either a predicate nominative or a predicate adjective? And how can you figure out if it's actually describing the subject? So how do you know if it's describing the subject? Okay. Look to see if the verb is the form of to be. If the verb is a form of to be, it's going to have a predicate adjective or a predicate nominative. Right? And those are the be verbs listed there. So when you write them down, make sure you know that they are the be verbs. Is, am, are, was, were, be, being, and been. All of these verbs show a state of being. Okay? They express that existence portion. So when I say I am a teacher, it's saying that my state of being, my identity, is teaching. That is my job. Alright, let's talk about when we're using pronouns as complements. Because remember, our pronouns still need to agree. So because the pronouns should describe the subject, it should have the same case as the subject when used as a predicate nominative. I have some examples here. For instance, who is at the door? So if anyone ever asks that, okay, so you're knocking on someone's door and they say, who is it, or who's at the door, you would respond, it is I. Now that's different than what we normally say. But if you look at, if you were to answer the question, you'd say I am. So most of these we can actually switch the sentence around, and it should be equal on both sides. Okay. If you look at, same thing with my second example here, if I said, is Jim there? You know, someone calls on the phone and says, Jim there? Jim would respond, this is he. Because really what he is saying is, he is speaking. So the he is describing the subject of them. Okay, so because I have those pronouns there. Same thing for this sentence here. The woman who stole from me is she. And I know it sounds awkward, but you just have to imagine that somebody is pointing out the woman who stole from them. So the woman who stole from me is she. Because I can do this backwards, right? She is the woman who stole from me. It makes sense both ways. Therefore, I know this is a predicate nominative because we know pronouns replace nouns. So when I'm using a pronoun as a predicate nominative, I need to use a subject pronoun. And that is all we have today for our subject complements part 1. And then next week we'll look at the other complements. This week we're only going to focus on our predicate adjectives and predicate nominatives. If you have any questions, please write them down so we can talk about them in class.